Thank you very much, Aneesh. And Marvin, you're next.
Well, it's a hard act to follow. I don't know if I can match your enthusiasm, but one thing, I wanted to comment a little bit on this being a kind of moment of change in the role of universities. And I think, your comment on the, Innovation Corps is a very good example, because there were no such funds a year ago.
Correct.
And, so but we're in a period where universities are being turned to provide a lot more stimulus in the economy. And I think the NACIE letter, which you have in your packet, I think represents a shift in really an acceptance of that mission. And I keep thinking in terms of barriers and enablers at universities, that universities are very, in many ways, risk-averse institutions, dare I say that. And universities are very embedded in many, many different cultures and traditions. And the issue of change, for us who are in this room and are on the edge of the university that's partnering, that's engaging in our regions, that's trying to develop collaborations, we represent the most engaged group in that way. And I think one of the challenges we face is how do we bring the rest of the university along in this effort? Because if you don't have your faculty, when you talk about PIs, for example, I think many of us in this room have had the experience of being very out front in developing what we view as partnerships and collaborations in our region, but we have a lot of trouble bringing our faculty along because their incentives and their culture and their set of rewards is really very different. And so I think we're at a point where, in terms of enabling the university to succeed, we need programs that fund some of these transitional and translational efforts. And I think when we did, I worked on developing this NACIE letter with President Coleman. In fact, Tom Rosario over there did most of our analysis for it. But the way this came about, I want to comment on it for a minute, because what we had for the first time is the national associations, the AAU, APLU, working with the Department of Commerce, with the Office of Science and Technology Policy, to say, look folks, we need to come together and shift the ground on which universities are going to play in this game. And this letter came about by soliciting from university presidents what they thought they could contribute, what they thought were stretch goals, and what they needed in order to be able to do this. And I think putting this letter together and sort of then identifying very clearly, in essence, a new mission for universities, where instead of people banging on the university door saying, why don't you help us, what are you really doing here, all you're doing is sucking down research dollars, you now have a situation where universities are going on record and saying, we will do this. Now, if you look carefully at the letter, it also says we need our federal and state partners to help with this funding. Because one of the truths for us at universities is a lot of this work is not funded very easily from our traditional sources of funding. Now you have a little bit of money, the Department of Commerce, a little bit of this NSF money that you can use in translational activity. But really, the bulk of these efforts are not funded from federal research grants. We are hard-pressed already in terms of tuition, state support if we're a state institution. So one of the concerns I have is, as we want to develop these bottom-up missions and embrace the idea of being activists in our region, we still have to tackle some serious resource issues because we don't always have the right sources of funding. We need to do better on coalition building. You mentioned venture capital, other sources of support. In some of our regions, the University of Michigan has been, we're a very large university with a lot of resources. We've been able to leverage a great deal and build a lot of opportunity in our community. But I know from working with my colleagues at other institutions, it's a challenge. And I think one of the things in TRE and in this group here, I think we have practitioners who have struggled in these trenches, and I think have a lot to contribute in figuring out how do we create these bottom-up strategies, but we still need, dare I say, top-down funding in many situations to accomplish these objectives. So I think we're at a pivotal moment where we either are going to learn how to collaborate and deliver, or I think, you know, we run the risk of kind of shrinking back to traditional activities.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Let me turn finally to Luis.
Thank you, and being last perhaps enables me to approach this in a slightly different way. Regionalism as a concept is not new, at least certainly not to Northeast Ohio, where Richard Koch, at the time managing partner of one of Cleveland's largest firms, brought a consulting company from Greece in the 60s to try to develop this concept, and needless to say, it takes a long time to begin to take hold and for us to begin to understand it. Today, I think that obviously the best way for us to understand it is to look at a map of the United States, actually a satellite picture of the U.S. taken at night, and what you see is, of course, not the traditional geopolitical boundaries, but you see a lot of spots of light, various sizes and so forth. And in Northeast Ohio, all of a sudden, the differences between Cleveland, Akron, Canton, and Youngstown disappear, and you see this nice, marvelous, luminous hole. Okay? And it reflects the economic activity of this region, about 4.5 million people. And obviously within it, if you could light up the lights of different colors, you would see the key industrial clusters, of which there are about 7 in Northeast Ohio. But again, we don't tend to see that. So now, you know, come from 60s to today, we have the satellite imagery that helps us to visualize this. And we have a concept that certainly Chuck and I and others participated in developing over the last decade, the innovation ecosystem. And it's defined as a loosely coupled, complex, interactive system, which defines the way that we go about adding value and innovating and so on and so forth. And yet, as we look at this, one of the many things that we discovered is that often elements are very loosely coupled, they're disconnected, they're often sometimes maybe even missing, and so there are chasms and gaps. You know, the valley of death, for one, is one of the things we recognize. And so as you look then at a region, you can imagine that there are a lot of things that are going on there that are irrelevant. There are things that are going on there that are somewhat disconnected, and a lot of productivity opportunities are lost. And that reminds me of universities, because today when anybody says that's academic, they mean irrelevant. When they talk about the ivory tower, they mean it's disconnected. And guess what best defines excellence in higher education? And that's the lack of productivity, right? Because only small classes make sense, and so on and so on. Okay, so what we have tried to do to get over this complex conceptual problem is to define a strategy based on relevance, connectivity, and productivity. Okay? That's our model. And what we've tried to do, and what I would urge us all to do from the perspective of the university, is to envision every source of expertise within a campus, every discipline, if you wish, as a tool. Consider, therefore, the university as a whole, and obviously will differ, as a tool chest. Okay, and add to that, maybe now that you've got this picture of a tool chest, this becomes really a very broad-based and potentially very robust platform for impact, for relevance, connectivity, and productivity, for economic development. Okay? And the way we go about this in this context is to try to create as many connections that are relevant and productive in order to add value and to leverage resources, because, as Marvin clearly pointed out, they're hard to find these days, but thank you to Aneesh and others who are finding some new opportunities that will make a great difference. And so the way that we've approached this, and by the way, indeed, not every region can be a Silicon Valley, but we'll have our own uniqueness, and certainly the work that we did at the Council on the Clusters of Innovation report, or Innovate America, or the work that the National Academy is doing on comparative innovation models, et cetera, shows us that we need to build on our strengths. And certainly in Northeast Ohio, although there are about 7 clusters, the University of Akron plays particularly well in the polymer area, I'd just like to tell you a story or two there to illustrate it, and then I'll shut up. The polymer industry in Northeast Ohio began in the 1870s with 4 companies. Go 143 years later, approximately, and you find now about 1,800 companies, large and small, that define Ohio as a major center, in fact, the largest employer. And so this defines a cluster, this defines a region. They're all over Northeast Ohio. And what we have been doing is connecting to different parts of this and others, because guess what? Polymers defines you, take the minerals of the water out of your body, the rest of you is a polymer. So there's an opportunity now for interfacing material science with biomedical application, and that's Frank Douglas and the Bioinnovation Institute, for example. And it interfaces with a variety of other things, the whole metalworking industry, because coatings are helpful in not only preventing rust, so we can get rid of that concept of a rust belt, and so on and so forth. And so we've been building essentially through this model of relevance, connectivity, and productivity, a series of collaborative initiatives, all of which are defining what we call, and others have called, the Akron model. And each one of these incremental collaboration builds added value, and through it, the opportunity for economic growth. And by the way, if that doesn't happen, our institutions would go down the tube, so we believe effectively in selfish altruism. If we help the economy will help us. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.